I was very happy when Professor Schmidt contacted me and asked me to talk about Schinkel and Charlottenhof, because Charlottenhof is among our, 23, 24 palaces, one of my really most favorite palaces, like the Island of the Peacocks as well. I prefer more the small and tiny. And Charlottenhof is really small in dimensions, but big in its vision and in its intellect. So the people we will meet here, the Crown Prince, later King Frederick William IV, who did it for his own use, is also a person, I think, which is not really full researched until now. And so I would like to do it as I would do it with you here in Potsdam, to go through the palace and really to point out aspects, I think, which could be very interesting. But first, whoops, oh yeah, just because we are all around the world and mainly in India and far away, just to show you where we are. So we are in Germany, in Europe, and here we are in Potsdam. Potsdam is a city next to Berlin, the capital of Germany. And in Berlin and Potsdam, this was the main center of the kings and queens of Prussia, which is not a very old princely house. They became king and queen in 1701 only. They were electors before, which is a special sort of a German prince. But however, so the main center was here, and Potsdam is well known as a center of palaces. We have some 15 palaces and their gardens around Potsdam. And for those who might not have been here, but who maybe were once in St. Petersburg, there it's the very same situation between St. Petersburg and Peterhof. It's also a landscape full of palaces and gardens. Just to encourage you to come here. Now, I'm sorry, I have a few slides which are really not in focus, and I absolutely apologize, but it was too late and to alter. So a ground map of Sanssouci Palace, which is one of these gardens around Potsdam. You can imagine or just see that the city is more or less here, and there's a river in the south. And this is the garden. So in this garden, you see already several buildings, and the garden was founded in the 1740s by a king of Prussia, which maybe was the most famous one, by Frederick II, or Frederick the Great, as he is well better known in the English-speaking world. And Frederick the Great, he used all the palaces he had inherited from his ancestors in Berlin and surrounding, but he wanted to have his own one, and that's the start of the story of Sanssouci as a garden house, if you like. It had only 12 rooms. It has 12 rooms, so a very tiny palace for a king, which became, well, through his military successes, one of the leaders in Europe. But it was his summer retreat, and he preferred being on his own in this little palace. And it's, like all our Potsdam sites, part of the UNESCO World Heritage. And the most famous one, it is view. To this Sanssouci Palace belongs another building, which is so famous because it's so funny, and you might have seen it already in a book. That's why I'm sharing it with you. It's the summer dining hall to Sanssouci Palace. So we are in a mid-Rococo period, full of follies in the gardens. And this Chinese house had a little kitchen and was used in summer for dinners. And towards the end of his life, and when he got more and more successful politically, Frederick the Great enlarged the garden and built at the very end, it's about 2.5 kilometers, so maybe 1.7 miles, something, an enormous palace with more than 600 rooms to have parties there and host guests. It's the so-called New Palace. Neues Palais of Sanssouci. This is just a tiny little bit of historic background, but we concentrate on another period now. We are jumping now several generations, and we come to the great-grand-nephew of Frederick the Great already in the 1820s, and look to the south part now of the garden. And that's the topic of our, or the feature of my talk. It's Charlottenhof Palace. To Charlottenhof Palace, there belongs another building complex I will introduce more carefully to you, the Roman Bathurst. And it's very funny. Frederick William IV, or the Crown Prince, who built this palace, he came to the throne, the Prussian throne, in 1840. So exactly 100 years after Frederick the Great came to the throne in 1740, his big ancestor. And it's amazing how the life of the two people were quite similar in their biographies. So also towards the end of his life, the Crown Prince, Frederick William IV, built this enormous, huge additional palace, the Orangery Palace, like Frederick II had done it in the east-west axis of the garden, and now this one made it in the south-north axis of the garden. But it's just little, information. So that's the size and the surroundings of Sanssouci Gardens in the 18th century. And then we have this rather huge enlargement in the 1820s, to be correct, in 1825, but we will come to that. Now, I promised also to give you an idea about the Roman Bathurst. It's not really in the center of my talk, but it belongs to Charlottenhof because it was constructed more or less together, and with the same architect, Carl Friedrich Schinkel. Now, the so-called Roman Baths are a complex of buildings. There's a gardener house. The big one was for the court gardener, a house for the court gardener. You can imagine now how important this role of a court gardener was, to get a house to live on the grounds of the royal grounds and in such a prominent building. Then a little house for all the apprentice for the gardens, and behind, we can't see right now, but it's not important from the outside, are the Roman baths. It's a real a folly. It is like a model of a real Roman bath, like you find it in Pompeii or Herculaneum. So it's one of these 19th century follies. And this whole complex has lots of features like stairs, porches, pergolas, and so on. And it's full of Italianità, we call that. So Italy and the style of the countryside architecture in Italy is very present here. And this whole complex, the Roman Baths, built something like a village, a little Italian village in the north of the Alps, but however, a little Italian village. And a couple of minutes walk away is Charlottenhof Palace. Now, this is then meant to be the villa of the prince. So the villa, it's like an antique or an Italian model to have a village, and outside the village you have very beautiful the house of the prince. It was a gift. It was Charlottenhof, not the building, but the grounds were a Christmas gift in December 1825 to these two people, a couple married 2 years before in 1823. It is Frederick William IV as Crown Prince still, and to the right-hand side, his wife Elizabeth, a princess of Bavaria, which is a region south of Germany. But they were a couple, and they got it as a Christmas gift to build their own summer retreat, their summer house. Now, the villa, as you see, is surrounded by beautiful gardens, everything designed by a garden designer, by Peter Joseph Lenné, exactly to fit together with the architecture of Schinkel. And you see it from this eastern side on top and to the right-hand side. You see it from another perspective. I will see more pictures of it. And I like especially this air view to the left-hand side, because a very important aspect of the whole close garden around the house is this terrace. So it's, you see, you go stairs up, and here also a little hill up. So this is on a high level, higher level than the surroundings, which is really flat. It's a terrace, and it has a semicircular bench, an exedra as the end, some water in the center, and a pergola flanking. We will come to that. And a water basin in a Palladian shape. Maybe you heard already about the important Italian architect Palladio, who invented or used very much this shape. So it is full of significance, and that's what I want to show you throughout my lecture. Now, another view of this terrace. Now, I took it yesterday, so you see there is no water anymore here, but we see very well the pergola and the bench also down. Now, the architect of the whole thing, of the buildings, not of the garden, but of the buildings and the terrace, Carl Friedrich Schinkel, you heard about already, as I learned in your studies, was so fond of his works that he started in 1819 to publish all his works. So every year there would be more sheets or more little issues follow with other things he had built. And he included in 1831 several views of Charlottenhof. He was so proud of it. And the nice thing is, so this view is taken from this semicircular bench on the terrace, and we see even the Neues Palais. Remember, I had showed you in the very beginning, in the distance. So the views in the landscape are very important, and also this ground map. In the same work, he published, of course, also the facades, and you see here the terrace, the cut through the terrace with the different level. We will come to that. And he also shows the facades. Now, the facade in his work and the facade nowadays are more or less the same. I would like also to discuss this entrance before we then enter the rooms. But therefore, it's important to get a little bit closer to the history, because in this, as I said, he got this floor, this region as a Christmas gift. And there was already a house, there was already a mansion from a former owner. She was called Charlotte, that's why it's called Charlottenhof. Hof means something like a farm. And this mansion must have looked like very similar to another one I'm showing here. That's a type from the end of the 18th century. In this region of Germany, you find it very often. So this is in Dambitz, and it's another place. But however, it is not a basic level, a ground level, which is not very high, and then the main floor, and you reach it from outside over a staircase. And this must have been the very same thing here in Charlottenhof. And you see what Schinkel does. He is using this old house, and this has to do, you have to imagine, a crown prince is the future king, but he has no money. He has almost no income. Of course, he has a little court, he has some funds, but he is not really what we would call rich. And therefore, he has really to see what he can do with the best possibilities. And the best possibility here was, well, Schinkel, of course, because he had this clever idea just to leave the farmhouse, but to alter it in its outside. And we will see that in the inside several times, that we still can find parts and traces of this former mansion. Now, what he did, he took the roof away. And you can imagine a roof like this. And then you see already it's a little, a little accent of the entrance, and like in this house. And this was more like the same here, even if it was not that deep coming out. But however, it was the same. And of course, the house formerly had a much smaller door and a staircase outside, but the side windows and the axes are still the same from the 18th century farmhouse. What Schinkel so did is first take away the roof. Then here with another view from the air, you see something this is really the ingenious of Schinkel and an ingenious aspect of this house, what he did, because you see here the outline of the 18th century house. And what Schinkel now did is he added just another house through it. And he gives it also in his drawings. We see here the different levels. So the level to the entrance side and the level to the garden terrace, the terrace which he added, because he didn't really want to have 2 stories, and this lower story is too low for the whole thing. And this line now marks the former facade of the 18th century house. The problem was the former house, as I said, had the staircase outside. And if you want to have a representative, important staircase inside, which is for a, future king, and the staircase is a very important feature in German palaces, then you need space for the stairs. And this clever thing is to add this section here throughout. So to enlarge the building in this direction is he got the space to do this staircase. We will see later on. Now, these are the 2, again, in pictures, the Crown Prince to the left-hand side and Schinkel to the right-hand side. And the Crown Prince, he really corrected designs and the drawings of Schinkel, so he mixed in very much. And that's also a parallelity to his ancestor Frederick the Great, who also mixed in all the projects. So it was for Schinkel sometimes not that easy, but the 2, they got along, very good along. And Frederick William IV, it's very important now for the next steps, had also other interests. His main interests were antiquity, so all the antique world and Italy, and he longed for getting permission to making a trip to Italy. Finally, in 1828, he could do so, when this building already was erected. So antiquity. Then he had a deep interest also in the Orient and Oriental fairy tales, and he made thousands of drawings on his own. We still have them. And as you can see here on the upper design for a church building in Berlin, which was never erected, you can see that he even studied Sanskrit. And maybe you can read it, I can't, but so he even had this interest. But maybe the deepest interest of his was Christianity. So the Christian faith. And he had a vision, like all the rulers and all the princes in this, as we call the Romantic period in the early 19th century, because they just had suffered from the French Revolution, suffered that all the organization of society is no more respected, and there are new times coming up. So one of the idea was that through working with the past and the good aspects and the aesthetic aspects of the past, one can heal the society which in their eyes is ill. So a beautiful surrounding cannot bring any problems. So that's the main conclusion. And he had an interest in Christianity because he thought, well, the Christians, they are divided in groups. They are the Catholics, there is the Evangelic Church. They are all Christians, but separate churches. And one of his visions was to bring together all them, and that's a vision he shared with Prince Albert, so the consort of Queen Victoria of England. And they had the idea, the vision of bringing together all these groups and to reunify the church like it was in the Roman period when the Christian church was erected. That's why the early kind of Christian churches, the so-called basilica, I come to that, became very, very important for him, like a symbol. This building is for me a symbol of this unity. Now, what had this to do with Charlottenhof? Have a look at the palace from the air. It's a picture taken in the 1930s, but it still looks like this. We have also a ground map from the Schinkel oeuvre, which shows us this, like Schinkel designed it. And here, if you ever thought about these early basilica type of Christian church, this is one of them, of the very famous one, an example from Rome, built in the 5th century. And these churches always have a long rectangular room. Then they have the side aisles and columns in between, and semicircular apses. And now when we look at the map and the ground idea of a basilica, you see that the crown prince, and this must have been an idea from the crown prince, which Schinkel just executed. He really translates the map of a basilica into his house. So it looks like a basilica which is in ruins. We still have here, we still have, if you like, this pergola, parts of the side aisle. We still have parts of the apsis. That's why this semicircular bench is so large and out of proportion and with a large wall. And this gives us this possibility. Now, coming to the entrance, because we want to go inside and have a look inside. So coming to the entrance, we see what I already mentioned, that this door is no more the door of the 18th century house, which was much, much smaller. And it's a little bit well over in dimensions, such a huge door. It has 2 door wings. And it's also Roman-like ideas. They are sliding doors. So these huge doors, you can see it from the inside. That's a part of the door and that's a part of the door. And they just go through this pilaster on rolls here. And you just slide it to this way or slide it to that way, which is completely unpractical for a home. Just imagine it's a person, a human being is up to this height. So just imagine you come home and you have to slide these enormous doors. This gives us, for the first time, a hint that the whole thing we will just see now is nothing more than a model. It's not really a place to live in. It was never meant to be really a place to stay for days or so, but it's like the model of an antique world. The crown prince didn't need it to live there, because in Sanssouci Palace, I showed you before, which is about 2 kilometers away, he had in a side wing his summer house. So even before he was married, so he didn't really need it, and he just wanted to have a model for his ideas. And these sliding doors are one thing. But looking at this entrance, over dimensioned, why has he these 2 doors and then these 2 windows upstairs? Because, and it took me really a while, one gets blind when you work here, you just pass and you don't realize what it is about. Suddenly one moment I saw something, and since then I can't look at it without noting it. It's a cross. These beams give a cross. And now, as you may know, the cross where Christ was killed and died, the cross is the main symbol of the Christian church. So it's a very positive symbol of belief. And yes, and I just show you this now. But this cross we see here, which is a Christian cross, has a surrounding in this plaster frame. It's not very well, you can't see very well, that's why I lined it out. This special door frame, and maybe you already came across with this when you look in antique architecture. It is a Etruscan temple door, which is exactly like this, built here. It's a former, an old print showing you this. And also in Etruscan tombs, we find these doors like in Egypt, or in Egyptian world, painted only, because that's the door in the tomb where you go through to heaven when you raise up again. So it is, so it doesn't really matter whether you go to the temple or out of your tomb, but you go to heaven. And both aspects, this antique aspect of going in a better world and the Christian symbol of going in a better world, the cross and this door, is here unified by Frederick Wilhelm IV, by the Crown Prince. And I'm pretty sure that he lined that out to Schinkel, and Schinkel found this absolutely splendid dimensions to do that. But now let's go in. A ground map, I will show it several times so that you can orient where we are. So that's the entrance. Here's the terrace upstairs, and we go up and then this way, but you will follow that. You come in. Just behind these doors, the staircase. The staircase in a bluish light with two stairs to the left and right upstairs, and everything is in on the lower level, it's in marble, and on the upper level, it's plastered and painted. This fountain, these huge fountains by Schinkel, it's a masterwork by Schinkel standing here. Please just try to think it away, because that's a fountain which was brought here in the 1860s. It was made by Schinkel for a complete other place. And then the Crown later on bought it, and they thought, where can we place it? And they brought it into this room and put it here. But the first design was without this fountain. The bluish light now comes when we turn around. It's very difficult to photograph, but I tried it yesterday. Come from the two windows. So these are the doors, and the two windows are in this bluish glass with stars. Also a design by Schinkel. He loved golden stars on blue ground, also painted everywhere and so on. So he did it here, and this gives this bluish light of the interior. Now we have to the left-hand side, early watercolor taken before this fountain was brought in, and also taken before some alterations had happened. For example, you see here on top by Thorvaldsen, two very famous reliefs in marble were added later on after the 1830s. And so this was changed, and also a lamp got in, and this table got here. So there were some alterations, and also even the surrounding of the basin was much more similar simple in the first, really in the first period. But we see here a fountain. This is a bell-shaped fountain. There was really meant to be water in the entrance. Now, why? Why in a German house where it's, well, more often cold than warm, to have water in the entrance hall? And we see it to the right-hand side again. Because having water in the entrance hall is in Oriental houses, and I said he had a specific interest in the Orient, a very, very common thing, because you come from the desert or from the sand, from the dry outside, you come to the house, you wash your feet, you wash your hand, you wash yourself, and then you're guest, and with all these Oriental delights. So to have a fountain at the entrance of a house is a very important thing. That's why he takes it, but it's not an Oriental house like Brighton Pavilion he builds. He built a Roman building. Why then this fountain? I show you again the ground map of the garden with the Exeter bench and where we are now, the staircase. And when we compare that again to the map of a basilica, a very early Christian church, they always had an atrium, so a courtyard, and a fountain before you go to church. And this was taken over by the early Christians from the Orient, that before you go and you meet your God in the temple, you have to wash your feet and you wash your hand. So that Frederick William IV has this here in this place, this fountain is his old idea, not of the Orient really, but of this early church. When we go up the stairs, we are standing now here and look to this side. There are two sections, just very tiny sections of non-importance, but they have these glass doors to keep away maybe the cold. And they have, because you're architects or becoming architects, I want to share it with you because I love it. This simplicity of an invention of even of technical aspects. To the right-hand side, you see the doorknob. And the doorknob, just in metal, it lifts, or you just bend it down. You just take it down, and it has here a little feather. That's just a metal. Sorry, not a feather. It's a spring, a little metal spring with a screw. And when you press that down, this metal plug here, which holds the door, is pressing to the spring. And then when you leave it, it comes up again. So a very, very, very simple mechanism, but it's grand. And these are all these lovely details in these palaces. So we come now to our first room, which is the ante room. Whenever you go to see a prince or a noble person in Europe in the 18th or the 19th century, you never will just go into the room and say hello. You always have to wait. And to wait, you need a room. And the ante room is something like a waiting area. That's why we have lots of chairs. I come to the chairs, and a rather modest decoration. This modest decoration is here. All the walls are glued with paper and then painted in a creamish color with these ornaments. And then we do have these strips, these like frames, golden relief frames. That's all. And even the decoration here in the corniche is only painted. It's nothing really in relief. So it is cheap, if you like, because there is not much money. Now the chairs, that's a type of chairs I will point out later on again, a type of chairs which is not really like a throne or something very important. It is a very typical, by this time, early 19th century, a very typical Italian restaurant chair in a trattoria, in an Italian restaurant in this period. You would have these very light chairs just with straw here, but normally they are not in this fabulous wood. It's chestnut wood, so it's a very, very good wood here. Normally they are in pine or something like this, but it's already, this Italianità is here, and you just have drawings and no paintings here, and the people could sit. But as I told you, it's just an idea. So there was almost never waiting someone, because he was only the crown prince, and he was almost never there to have official guests. But when there was a huge renovation and restoration in the 1970s, they discovered that behind the paper, above the paper, which is also glued and fixed to the ceiling, there's still the decoration painting from the former house. So it says that that's a proof that Schinkel took nothing away. This room is one-to-one still a room from the 18th century mentioned. It's just and only altered in its decoration with a nice terracotta chimney piece, but it was used in summer only, so they even didn't need fireplace. Through this antechambre or first room, you come to the crown prince's study, a tiny room. Just compare it in the size to the other rooms. It's a tiny room, his study, where he would have, well, someone to discuss something or so. So you see, it was really not meant to do reigning or something like this. It was just to write letters, or if at all. So his desk, and a very nice construction by Schinkel, also a reading chair. You have here a pulpit where you can have your book, and it's very comfortable. You don't have to carry the book in your hand, and you just are in your leather chair and you read and read and read. The walls, this green is also a specialty in Prussia in this period. This is a type of, let's say, strong apple green or a pistache green, which was, the pigment was just discovered some years ago in the early 19th century in a German city called Schweinfurt. That's why it's called Schweinfurter Grün, Schweinfurt Green. And it's on the base of arsenic, so it's highly poisoning. And this, of course, nowadays is no more the real Schweinfurt Grün. It's just the color tone in a restoration. Now, this green was very much in fashion in this period, and Schinkel used it in several palaces, so the Crown Prince also wanted to have it here. But the surrounding is interesting. He is surrounded on the wall by prints, only prints, no paintings. And all these prints have one topic, it's landscapes. And it's ideal landscape, Arcadian landscapes or bucolic landscapes, meaning landscapes with ruins, with the rest of antiquity, landscapes which make the link between the antique world and our presence. And it's a thing which came very much in fashion throughout the end of the 18th century. So it is just people living in the history and in the nature and having no sorrows and just being there and being in one stream of life and history. And being a romantic person, the Crown Prince was very much fond of it. And he was so fond of it that throughout this window, you have this view. And this view is completely artificial. I'll show you now another picture because you can see it better. That's mainly the thing we've just seen throughout the window. This is an artificial hill made by Peter Joseph Lenné, the garden designer. Artificial composition of trees, which is very picturesquely a composition, and even with a little tombstone in it. So it's a little bit like one of these Acadian landscapes translated in the reality, looking out of his window. So this gives a link from outside to inside. That's the Crown Prince's study. Next to it, we have the bedroom. The bedroom in Charlottenhof is also in the very same green, and it has other features showing that these two rooms, the study and the bedroom, belong together. And that's a reference, again, a reference to his ancestor, Frederick the Great, because Frederick the Great, 100 years before, invented somehow a double function of study and bedroom with an alcove in once, because he was always claiming that he never would sleep, that he would work around the time and so on, well, which was a very good marketing thing. So, this was an invention by him. Here, of course, the Crown Prince, he could not take away the walls because they are important for the substruction of the building. But he could, by colors, by kind of woods, even by marble and so on, he could show that these are a unity and this is enough. It's just the intellectual idea. Now, the bedroom has a special feature. I'm not sure if you would note that, and I'm absolutely not knowing about the Indian tradition, but a thing which in this time, so in 1825, 1826, in Germany absolutely did not exist, even if you see it here, is a double bed, which is one bed, letto matrimoniale, one bed, not two beds put together, but one bed. This was out of any idea. The beds have, even for couples, have to stand out of it. And this is only the model of a bed. So it was never meant to for the couple, the royal couple, the Crown Prince, to stay here in this room overnight. It is just this idea of the importance of the marriage in the Christian religion and the early Christian religion. And he expresses it here with his double bed and then with a very famous Assumption of Jesus Christ, but I don't go that deep now, above. So this is the idea of the perfect marriage expressed by this invention of a furniture. On the other side, when we turn around, we have this Exedra. We see that very well in the ground map. You can see it here with the Exedra. And this was added by Schinkel. So the former house was here just finished, and he added this. Why did he add this? Of course, you have more space, you maybe have more light, and it's an interesting feature also from outside to see this. But there is now the balance. It's not the Christian thing like the marriage bed, but it is a villa, an antique villa as a model. It's the Villa of Diomedes in Pompeii. So the city close to Naples, which was destroyed by volcanoes, by Vesuvius, and then it was discovered in the 18th century, and it was an archaeological site to find all these former houses which were quite good preserved just under the ashes and so on. And there's this huge villa for a person, for Diomedes, and he had a bedroom, a cubiculum with a semicircle ending, overlooking gardens and even some water. Why do we know this? This villa was very much described by Pliny, and Pliny was very important. His books throughout the classicism and the early 19th century, so they read, and this was an idea. Wow, that's a citation of a very, very famous antique villa if we do a bedroom in this way, because it's also known that in this bedroom here, there was an alcove like this here, an alcove, so a niche with a bed in it. So Schinkel had visited Pompeii. He knew that from the archaeological site, and the Crown Prince knew it by this period when it was built from the books, from the descriptions of Pliny, and so they came to this idea. Now, when we go one room further on, we are now in the next corner room, and this is the study of the Crown Princess. So he had a study, she has a study, and in between is their common bedroom. You see, this must be in this period, this must be theory. You can't live like this in the early 19th century at court. It is really an ideal way of equal rooms working and sharing the bed in night. Now, this study is one really of the most beautiful rooms we have in its color scheme and so on. Everything is original in it, preserved. Well, the paint is refreshed, but every furniture, everything is done by Schinkel except this chair. This chair is a gift from a relative from Russia, from the sister of the Crown Prince. It's a Russian steel Tula chair, but it was in this room from the very beginning onwards. But let's first come to the color scheme. Now we've seen that there are so many antique aspects in this house. Why to have a color scheme of rose and this green? People would maybe think about, well, Rococo and this rose, feminine rose, or is it a very feminine place and so on? But no. This color scheme of rose and this green is in the theory, architectural theory of the end of the 18th century already, a very Roman color scheme. And the best proof is when you ever heard about the famous English architect Robert Adam, who used it very, very often, and in one of his masterpieces, this library at Kenwood House, you can see very easily this color scheme. So this is a Roman hall, and it's in these two colors. So this was also the idea here. Let's make it in this, well, feminine on one side, on the other side, it's also this Roman aspect in the colors. Now, we do have several views, historic views from this room, and that's one of the earliest, well, it is the earliest watercolor. So the room was done in 1825 to 29, and we have here from 1833 a view, and you see already the chair. It was a gift from a very early time, and every detail, even the vases, so it's everything preserved. But you don't see these pictures here because they were added later, and they are on another watercolor we have from 1846. So you see there's almost no alteration, but this design is altered. And by the way, it's the only room in the whole little palace which has three-dimensional. These are not painted. These are three-dimensional, these palmettes, aspects of plaster work in the ceiling, but nothing else. Now there's another drawing by Ludwig Persius, who was a student of Schinkel and also involved in the whole Charlottenhof construction, and he also made a design of it. And he shows you a corner I don't have in another view, which is semicircular bench. And in this corner, you can just hardly see there stands a vase, which stands there still nowadays. It's a porcelain vase, which was a gift from the bride, so the crown prince's parents, which were king and queen of Bavaria, to the young couple to their wedding in 1823. Therefore, it's because they are in Bavaria, and Munich is the capital of Bavaria, where the court is in Bavaria. And they have a known porcelain manufactory in Nymphenburg. That's why it's Nymphenburg porcelain, as a gift to the young couple, and their portraits in the manner of antique cameos included. It was a Bavarian architect, Gärtner, who made for the porcelain manufactory this design. And he used therefore a model, an antique model, which is a hydra, an Etruscan hydra, so from the, well, maybe second or third century after Christ. It is an antique vessel you need to store and to carry water. So a hydra. And the young couple was so fond of this shape and this reanimation of the antique shapes in this form, they handed it over to their porcelain manufactory, which was in Berlin, or still exists in Berlin, and said, please have this vase on loan for a couple of weeks and make a copy. And this is now a Berlin example. Berlin made a copy of this model, which was therefore called the Munich model, or the Bavarian vase, because it was copied after. And it became strictly reserved, this shape, for the royal family to make very important gifts. As far as I know, there is none in India, but in Turkey, in Constantinople, well, in Istanbul, there, even that far, the gifts were going of these shapes. But that's just a little thing, because you like also objects. And another object in this room, sorry, I don't have a color photograph, but it doesn't matter. That's this day bed designed by Schinkel for the crown princess, and it stands also in the room. Maybe I'll show you. Here you see. Sorry, here you see. It's in the room, and therefore he used models. Because when Schinkel was in Italy in 1819, he made lots of drawings, of course, in Herculaneum at the court, wherever the antique things which came to the light were preserved. And you see very easily how much these Roman bed influenced his designs. Now the next room, we now had the studies and the bedroom, and now we come to a living room, and that's is again, like the bed, it's an absolute no-go in the early 19th century at court. You never in this period have a central table and chairs and a sofa around. The normal way was that all the chairs would stand along the wall, and when you want to gather and maybe have tea and coffee, then the servants would bring a table, and you would move the chairs to the table, and afterwards it would go. But to have this center and even a round table, which doesn't give you any hierarchy, it doesn't have a high end. This is a very, very bourgeois thing, which comes outside the court, starts in the early 19th century in the bourgeois surrounding, and then later on it comes also in a fashion at the court, but this is one of the first examples. So this was to come together maybe and to have coffee or tea, or to do needlework. So the carpet and the chairs, they were worked by the princesses in the evening. So someone would read a book, and you would stand, and you would sit, and you would just make your needlework. So all is even homemade. And of course, you surround yourself in this very intimate room with souvenirs. So one souvenir is this watercolor of a room in St. Petersburg. It is the living room of the sister of the Crown Prince, of Frederick William IV. His sister, now then called as Tsaress of Russia, Alexandra Feodorovna, had this living room. She sent it to him, and you see her even sitting here. It's like a little bit like a photograph. And he hung it in this room. There are two views of it, of this palace, so that his history is somehow present. And then you can talk about what's going on in Russia and so on. And so it's very, very familiar. Another thing is above the sofa, it is a view from Switzerland, from the Lake Lucerne, from the heart of Switzerland, where Switzerland, well, was founded somehow. And that's the Tell from Wilhelm Tell, the chapel, which is part of the mythical stories, of the development of Switzerland, but it doesn't. So it's just here because, and that's very important now, the Crown Prince finally in 1828 got permission by his father to do a travel to Italy. So finally, he had the house was still under construction, and he could travel for several months to Italy. His wife didn't come with him, and going to Italy with a group of people, he crossed Switzerland, and that's a souvenir from this trip. So Switzerland, with all these, happy people in the mountains, as he expressed, is a positive thing also to talk about. And the most intimate and personal thing is maybe this one, because when the Crown Prince and his friends were in Naples, close to Pompeii and Herculaneum, at the foot of the Vesuvio, of the Falcony, it was the day when his wife in Potsdam had her birthday. So what they did is they had in the countryside a birthday table. They had, some linen to give shade. They even have a memorial wrap of flowers. There's even someone sitting here. And on the table, it's a picture of the Crown Princess of Elizabeth. It's very intimate and personal. And by the way, you see here these simple chairs, these trattoria chairs I talked about. And one of the group going with the Crown Prince was an artist. It was August Kopisch, and he made this sketch. And when they returned, the Crown Prince gave this sketch to his wife and said, "Have a look, and your birthday, we did it." And it's such a great alternative to our WhatsApp pictures, and very quickly what we would do nowadays. It was this watercolor, and it was installed here. Now, but let's go on. We come now to the central hall, the main hall in the palace. Also here, during the restoration, all the paper on the ceiling and on the walls were stripped down, or partly stripped down, and there was mural paintings discovered from the former country house, so from the former mansion, in this late 18th century style. But Schinkel decided that this way of painting, was not modern enough and not good enough, and not good in its simplicity. That's why he and the Crown Prince, they decided just to glue paper over it and to paint it in white, and doing this framing and the felth on the wall, on the doors. And we even have a picture, but in the 1970s, it was the GDR, and it was a communist system here in Germany, this region. And it was politically quite difficult to do this restoration. And for certain reasons, no one could explain me up to now. They did not, just these photographs in black and white, and no one took colored photographs, because after they had discovered it and made these three pictures, they glued again the paper over it. So nowadays it looks like this again, and underneath we know is this 18th century painting. Now, this shows us, by the way, this showed us that the dimension of the room here the whole dimension is also the big hall of the mansion of the 19th century mansion. And another proof is the niche with the sculptures, very cleverly used by Schinkel to put sculptures in, because these niches are nothing more than very common 18th century, here, very common 18th century niches to put a round oven in it. And if you have such a big room, you need 2 ovens. So that's very common, these niches. That's from some other house. And you see here used by Schinkel again. But let's do another thing. Look at another thing. Excuse me. I just need it. Let's look to the decoration, which is here since the end, since the period, so since 1825. It is watercolors, prints, but colored with watercolors from Giovanni Volpato. Giovanni Volpato made these designs very, very famous and influential in the period, in the design history of the end of the 18th European design history of the end of the 18th and early 19th century. And he made them after a hallway or a loggia in the Vatican, where the Pope is in Rome, which was painted much 200 years before by Raphael, by a very famous Italian Renaissance painter, with ornaments Raphael had found in Pompeii, or in Herculaneum, to be correct, in Herculaneum. And he had just added all these designs, you see here, very similar to the prints, all these designs to this loggia. And these loggia, they are really some initial point also of Italian Renaissance. They got so famous. And by the end of the 18th century, Volpato just did these prints, and they were dispersed all over the world. They are in all the libraries, good libraries, and so on. And the Crown Prince decided, together with Schinkel, we were in Italy and so on. And that's really the basic, these ornamentations, the basic of our taste, the base of our taste. We should have it in this room, so they hang here. We do have also another famous feature, this table by Schinkel in gilt wood. And also, therefore, Schinkel studied antique furniture from Herculaneum, and he has seen similar Roman furniture from the 1st century. And you see it's very similar with these lion feet and also filling ornament in between. And so he designed these, and with a palmet, all the elements, you know, from antique sculpture. He designed this very famous table for Charlottenhof. And this now is like the whole room. It is a little bit, let's say, it's a big contrast to the rooms we've just seen. We've seen an enormous, well, demanding staircase. And we've seen now this room, which is really high style and level. But all the other rooms are much more modest. And this table, of course, a gilt table, is appropriate to this center, has an importance. Now I did a dart here, because we now want to look through this door back to the room, which is the staircase. We are now in the center axis. And looking to this, we can see this reddish aspect. Even in this picture, you see it even better, this reddish and warm light aspect of this festivity hall or center hall, and this cool bluish light on the other side in the staircase. Why? I did it here in blue and red, because we see here now the axis of Charlottenhof, because in this direction, which is east, there is a rose garden. And east is the direction where the sun is rising. So the sun as a symbol of life. The life is raising in the east, brings the flowers, the roses, and brings this very warm. And the sunset is in the west. So in the west, it's getting cool and cold. And in the west is also death. And how to express death in a garden. They choose an antique idea of a hippodrome. A hippodrome is, in the Roman period, a horse race, oval horse race area, where lots of the early Christians were killed by the Romans or the martyrs. And so the hippodrome they choose as a symbol of death in the West. So you see here this enormous idea of having the sun and the life going up and then sinking down and bringing the death in this coolness. And to think about, well, many architects nowadays, they are a little bit afraid of color, if I may say, or they are just exaggerating color, but color can really have a meaning. And I think this is in this very fabulous done in this example. Now, that this is not just an idea of us as being art historians, you can also see on the former visual drawings. Here, it's also one of the series of the watercolors, and just enlarged from the center. This is the view from the terrace, so where the sun is in our back now, and we look to the terrace and the terrace door. So this is the table we've just seen. Then we look, the door is open here. So we look in the staircase, you see the glass, and you even see the top of the fountain in the staircase, which you just met. So this looking through in its axis is really wanted. In the other axis, from the so in the enfilade, from the study of the crown princess, which is in our back, through the living room to the hall and so on. We also have this with the same, more or less the same working, because in our back it's north. So north is also cold, has no sun, looking south. So it gets warmer the more we come south. So that's really a clever system. Let's go on. So from the festivity hall, we are now going through, well, direction of south to this room. And again, we have an anteroom. Remember, we had an anteroom here with these Italian trattoria chairs. And now we have another one with lots of chairs, but these are much, well, more stable, so they are much better built than the other ones. And so the thing is, as I told you already, the whole house being a model, it has this symbolistic level of staircase and hall, the thing I just explained. Then it has the ideal of an apartment, the ideal of the marriage and all the antique aspects and of family life in the living room with a round table of whatever. And it has a section where the couple really would have stayed if they would have stayed in this palace. And therefore they needed an anteroom as well. So, and that's just the meaning of this room. This room, again, is mirroring now Italy and the Renaissance, because the Renaissance in Italy is something like the bridge between the antique world and, well, the presence of the crown prince in the early 19th century. It's like the interpretation already. So all these prints, except one in the ceiling, but all these prints around are just copying works by three Renaissance masters, which is Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, and Michelangelo. So the three top of Renaissance. And we see, for example, here after Raphael, a print which is copying the famous designs Raphael made for carpets, to wave carpets. That's now too difficult to explain to you, sorry, for wall hangings. But these are famous works by Raphael in large dimension. They are now in the V&A in London. And a printer or a printmaker had copied them. That's why it's the wrong side around. So this photo is here. That's with making a print, it happens. And the crown prince hangs it here, so just to remember this big art of Raphael. And the thing on the ceiling, this which is not by these three artists, is by a Baroque artist. It's by Guido Reni. And Guido Reni had made this very famous ceiling, you see it here, in a casino, which is a smaller building in the garden of the Palazzo Pallavigini, a real huge noble palace in Rome in 1612. And Guido Reni had painted here Apollo, so one of the Greek gods, the god of the sun and of the light, following Aurora, who brings the morning, and she's just flying away, and he brings the sun. And of course, every prince in Europe wanted to compare himself with Apollo. So I'm the one which brings the light, and well, just in these days, that has a significance in the world. However, we don't want to get political, but that's very, very important. Now, this was already in several Prussian palaces from the ancestors of the crown prince used. So, for example, here by his grandfather on the island of the Peacock, you've seen the Majerei in one of the former sessions, and here it's now the tiny little palace of the island of the Peacock, and in the festivity hall you see it also copied on the ceiling as an antique reference. So the crown prince didn't even have to make a reference to Rome and this casino, but he could also just make a reference to the island of the Peacock. Then we go on from this antechamber to a little room in between, also very comfortable, a little personal living room. I don't want to speak too much with it, but you see here, that's the terrace, and it's the pergola on the terrace in the garden. And there are again souvenirs. There are prints and drawings by Bleuler. It's landscapes from the route from Potsdam to Italy. So it's the souvenir of this Italian travel the crown prince had. And I just show you, a snapshot from yesterday from this wall. And you see, because I used now several times these watercolors and trusted them, and I went to details, and you can wonder and say, well, the artist can just invent something, but you see how precise they were. They are pre-photographic aspects, and they had to be very detailed and very precise, because the commissioner in this kind, it was the court himself, they wanted to show the environment in all the details. So, however, now we go to our back to the last room, so through this door, and that's maybe the most famous room or the second last room, maybe the most famous one of the whole palace. It's a tented room. The walls, it's paper, printed paper in stripes in blue in different sizes to give this pattern, with a painted brown ornament. And the ceiling, this is linen, which is stretched like a painting, like oil on canvas painting. It's linen stretched on frames and then paper glued on it. And the fabric for the curtains and for the two beds, because here behind there are simple beds, iron beds, and all the other things, they are woven linen fabrics. Now, this tented room looked a little bit different in the early 20th century. You see it here, how it was, well, got throughout the centuries, because from the second half of the 19th century onwards, this palace was never used again. So it was just kept, it was maintained, but no one went there, and it was just in a sleep. And when it became a museum in the early 20th century, after the end of the monarchy, it was reopened, as you see it on this picture, and it stayed until after World War II. There was no bombing here in Potsdam, or no, not on this palace. And so it stayed like this. And then in this restoration of the 1970s, they didn't keep how it was furnished before the renovation, but they knew it better, and they followed the watercolors. So you see very, very correctly how it is here, very easy. So please be careful when you see historic interior and the people tell you, oh, that's very authentic and that's absolutely how the king and queen lived. it's almost always, it's an invention by art historian, and it's a correction of the history of the past, but that's another aspect. Now, this motif of a tented room in blue and white stripes with a brownish ornament, we find also in this room, which doesn't exist anymore. We just know it from inventories that it had in the early 20th century the same color scheme, and it's in Malmaison, which is a little palace next to Paris. And we find it still preserved in a villa or another mansion on the Lake Constance, so in Switzerland, next to Constance itself, and which is called Arenenberg. Now, why? There were even more of them, but now why? Because Malmaison was the country house of Joséphine de Beauharnais, who was the first wife of Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon, I'm pretty sure you know who it is. So she was married to him. She had no children with Napoleon, but she brought 2 children to her marriage with Napoleon. One was her son, Eugène de Beauharnais, who married a Bavarian princess, so to the court of Bavaria, and became Count, which is a title, a noble title in Europe, Count Leuchtenberg. And she had a daughter, Hortense de Beauharnais. And after the end of the Napoleonic era, when Napoleon had to go to exile, his family also had to go to exile, and Hortense went to Switzerland, to Constance, and she bought this mansion and decorated it. So she chose the decoration of this room she knew from her childhood, from Malmaison, for her living room, just these blue and white stripes and just the idea. So it's a family souvenir. And Eugène de Beauharnais, we don't have a picture of it, but we know it from inventories, had in his palace in Munich in Bavaria the very same. Now, why do we have it in Charlottenhof? Because it is the half-sister, it's not really the sister, but they liked each other very much, of this, well, daughter-in-law of Napoleon. It's Elizabeth, our Elizabeth, who the crown princess, who was married to the crown prince. So this room here is not just a fancy decoration, or let's make a tented room because it's on pier and it's so nice and so on. It has, again, the color and the room it's everything preserved. We have this big memory of Italy. In this time, it's against by Volpato. We met already in the Prince in the main hall. Yes, in this Copper Prince. Here now it is not the loggia of Raphael, but it's the stanzas or the rooms of the Pope, which Raphael also painted in the Vatican, and they are here. So it's the whole Vatican program is in this room. But maybe more interesting for us to come to the end is this writing desk by Schinkel, designed for this room in around 1830. It's outlined with these Ionic columns, give us the and also this architectural section give us really a antique facade, a Ionic facade, a Greek outside, and it stands for this absolute ideal of antiquity and the antique architecture as we've seen. But when you open it to write a letter, it gives this, which is ornament style. You may be familiar from Gothic cathedrals in Europe, in France, and in Germany. And according to the theory of Schinkel and also of the Crown Prince, who was very important in that, the Gothic style is the German patriotic style. So you have the link between the antique world and the German presence, even if it's a medieval style, you have in one piece of furniture together. And that's, we've now on our tour, saw that so many times, these linking antique world and presence and so all these ideas, and it gets together. Now, it's almost evening here. No, it's late afternoon. and the mist is coming up, and I hope I didn't bring too much mist in your brains, and that you got a little insight to this little palace and how decoration and inside decoration can be linked, and really if it's small in size, it's big in ideas. Thank you very much.
I really don't know what to say. It was such a wonderful, brilliant, inspiring lecture. And I couldn't have known so many insights if I had just visited. And of course, we really want to have the actual experience. But the detective work, the analysis, and being able to lead us to the place was just really absolutely wonderful and so inspiring. Thank you so much. I would like to use this opportunity to use time for questions and discussions. We are a very small group, so you are able to pose your questions, unmute yourself. For this, we had a number of points and discussion already emerging in the chat. We can go through this. Once was, for instance, the colors are very interesting, and I always find in the history of interiors in Germany, it's somehow in the reception in the 20th and 21st century is different from countries like France and even Belgium, Netherlands, and Italy. Somehow there seems to be a real disconnect in Germany with the history of interiors. It's almost an exclusive focus on the 20th century and modernism. And I remember when I was teaching, I will not mention the university, at a European university, I taught the history of interior design, which hadn't been taught in over 100 years. And once the dean found out about my curriculum, he interfered and he wanted me to only talk about the 20th century. So I find this very alarming, this kind of focus on the 20th century. Whereas in Germany, you have so many interesting aspects of interiors, which are not so well known maybe in the context of the history of interiors, in Europe. And especially their role in synthetic paint and the color scheme. We know Goethe's theory of colors, and what we see here is so much connected with the intellectual world, the artistic world of Germany at the time. I mean, we see the green, which I also know as Parisian green, which was used by Goethe in the study, and he focused on this as well, the particular color schemes and their effect on people. So all of this is there. And, I'm also thinking of, all these influences that you see from antiquity, from various parts of antiquity, ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, ancient Rome. This so much reminds me of Gillies' design for Frederick the Great's monument that so much influenced Karl Friedrich Schinkel. And here you see the Egyptian obelisks. We actually discussed this in class. The Greek temple, the Roman arch, but with the kind of quadriga almost from the Brandenburg Gate, and all of this amalgamation. So what I really find here in Schinkel, you've pointed this out in such a detailed way, all of these influences. And I find, also for students of architecture who will be doing actual design, it's not only a question of logic or design logic, but what we, I think, can learn from the 18th and 19th century is how ideas, books, discoveries, all of this had an impact on taste. And I think it's so rich. And this is something what is missing in current design, that we don't have this meaning, but we only have, just aesthetic considerations or taste. And this is something that I find so enriching and so wonderful. And I think, Potsdam is this example where you have all of this in such a small area, from the Peacock Island, from books about Tahiti and Diderot that highlighted certain aspects of it, even on marriage and on love, which I think is very closely actually related to the design that probably Wilhelmine had influenced as well. So this is really wonderful. So maybe we can open the floor to address some more of these aspects. So where shall we go? And by the way, the drawing, was it a drawing or watercolor? I can't remember, that you showed us of the entrance with the fountain. To me, this looked like a lingam in India. This black fountain. And it's interesting that the Crown Prince, who really loved drawing and architecture and design, was also interested in the Far East. You showed this drawing with the Sanskrit. I had never actually seen this before, but even the games he liked to play with his own name, like Fritz Butt, you know, referring to the Delphine Dauphin, and also, wasn't it called House Siam actually also? Yes. Didn't have this name?
I didn't want to go that far, but he called it Siam. My little Siam, which he used as a model. I said he had this interest in Orient studies and so on in Siam, which is Thailand in German, and he used it because it was this idea of people in Siam are free. They don't have any obligations. They are absolutely free. And just remember that Frederick the Great called his palace sans souci, without sorrows. So also being free, the place where you can be free. And there are many funny things, because he signed his letters sometimes with Fritz Butt. Fritz is the short form of Frederick. Fritz Butt, which is this halibut, so the fish of Siam. So it's Butt of Siam, and he would sign even letters with that. Well, not official one, but personal one. Yeah.
Yes, let me go to some of the questions here.
I see here one, if I may. I read it already, about the GDR period.
Yeah.
And how it related to the Russian situation in St. Petersburg, where all the palaces were destroyed already in 1941, and then the reconstruction of the Peterhof and all the others, Pavlovsk and so on, started right after in the Stalinist area right after the war. Now in Potsdam, the GDR, the situation was that only a few palaces were open to the public as museums. It was Sanssouci itself, the palace, it was the Chinese house, and it was the Neues Palais, the new palace. But even Charlottenhof was only opened in the 1970s, and before, for 30 years of GDR or 20 years of GDR, it was not open to the public, and because it was run down and so on. So it was then open to the public. And all the other palaces, they were used as military museum, in other functions, on the countryside, even as hospitals and so on. And there was not much destruction in the substance. Here it was different in Berlin with the bombing, which was Charlottenburg, but not in Potsdam. Only the city palace was completely destroyed. But of course, lots of works of art were lost because the Red Army, so the Russians, after the war was over in spring 1945, they started to pack works of art and to bring it to Russia. Now, lots of these works of art were returned in the end of the 1950s, but not everything. So we have in the Neues Palais, for example, and in Sanssouci, we have enormous gaps of the original decoration, but luckily not in Charlottenhof, because this neoclassical period had no importance in this period. It was not the taste of the after-war period, and these objects were not considered as being precious enough and good enough to take. And they are very modest in their shape. So we are very lucky that all these designs by Schinkel, at least, that they preserved. I hope this is more or less the answer to the question.
It is very interesting in the context of India, when the Indian states and the princes acceded to India after independence. So what happened to these palaces? And to some extent, this question is still relevant, because some of the lawsuits have been pending for decades. And only this year or last year, they came to a conclusion, for example. And so I'm interested also in Germany. I heard that recently the Crown Prince, or he would be the legal heir to the Kaiser, yeah. he sued also for trying to regain some of the properties and objects. So it's really interesting to see, actually, you have the DDR and in the story before, the dissolution of the monarchy, what should be done with these palaces. And also we shouldn't forget that we have the history before. As far as I know, during the reign, during the reign of the Kaiser and the king, people were allowed to enter the park. Is this correct?
And also palaces, some of the palaces. They were open. Sanssouci Palace was open. Well, that's a difficult task, because already in the 18th century, some people, if they were dressed correctly and so on, and gave a good tip, they could enter the palaces if the king was not there, Frederick the Great, for example. But by the end of the 19th century already, Sanssouci became some sort of a museum. So it was it was under Wilhelm II Kaiser period that you could regularly go and have a look in it. But officially a museum, it's only after the end of the monarchy. So here, well, the revolution is in 1918, but they needed 8 years to discuss what properties and what belongings belong to the family and what's owned by the state. So it took until 1926 to separate the two things, and therefore, yeah, it's and then from the 1920s onwards, they were museum. And the thing is that these palaces, they were immediately looked as national monuments, so as material culmination of history. That's why art historians, it can be better shown in the new palace than in Charlottenhof, immediately started after the emperor was gone and the monarchy was gone to refurnish the palace according to the 18th century inventories in the Friderician style, because the furniture were still there. They eliminated all the end of 19th century taste, and they thought authentic is only if it's in its first juice. And you know, that's very, very thrilling, this aspect. And now we had another world war in between, so we miss lots of these objects. We miss, well, about some 20 to 30,000 works of art. And so nowadays it's even more complicated. It's a very theoretical but nice topic to talk about.
And then to talk about the curatorial aspect and the idea of a historic house museum, and as opposed to an exhibition or gallery space. So I can't remember any exhibitions specifically relating to Charlottenhof. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about this, and about, have you ever done any exhibitions there in Charlottenhof? Are you planning to do any? And also, what do you think about the concept of the historic house museum? Are you aware of these discussions? Because it is such an Anglo-American context, right, of the historic house museum, which is heavily debated also currently in the US. I don't know whether you've come across this Anarchy guide, so that someone wrote about this. I will, if you don't, I'll send you a copy of this. The whole question of how should it be presented, and there are these days where everybody should just sit down and use it, and to not have a guided tour, but to let people actually walk around at random, and the things that they are interested in is so different from what is actually discussed in the guided tour. And for many people who love historic buildings, but the guided tour is usually a nightmare. I mean, wherever you go, the kind of trivia that are being mentioned, there are certain strange parameters, even things you don't want to know about, and important questions not being discussed, and so on. So how are you dealing with this?
Oh, well, that's a wide topic. So first of all, it's a huge difference between the buildings, because every building has its own charms and its own problems. For example, in Charlottenhof, it's so tiny, as I well, maybe showed, and you understand, that there no more than about 10 people in once can go in a group in it. And it's also so many things standing around that we don't have, we only can do guided tours, or let's say tours with a guide. So it's not yet in Charlottenhof, but in other palaces we installed already something like a media guide where you don't have only audio, but you also have pictures and texts, and it's like a little cell phone, and you can really get more and more information. And then these groups, they start in ones with a guard, and they just move through, but everyone is looking and he listening to the things he prefers and or she likes. And Charlottenhof is that tiny. Of course, a guided tour, if you say it's a horror, for many people, me included, it's a horror because you have to wait first. You are never there when the tour begins, or you're already late and the tour started already. So that's one thing. The other thing is the languages. You are very limited. You only have one language, or well, maybe with some little other aspects. But it can be also thrilling. And I must say, in some palaces and in Charlottenhof, we have very good guides, which could have presented this lecture as well. So that the people really, that there's a dialogue, and they talk also about all the experience in not only the historic ones, but also the experience in the last years with the palace and so on. So it's a real dialogue, and that's not too bad. But in big palaces and historic houses, it's also a problem with us. So we do these media guides more and more. Of course, we can't have it used, the furniture, because it's our thing to preserve it, and then you can't use it. But another thing is also discovered right now here. England is for sure a little bit further in this question. Whose story are we telling? Just an example. After the end of the monarchy in 1918 in the Neues Palais, the guides, they would talk about Frederick the Great, Frederick the Great, and Frederick the Great. Only about him, even not about his wife. So about him and about the story and the big military success of Prussia. Then we have the Nazi regime, and we have World War II. After the World War II, it was the GDR. And the GDR, of course, as a communist system having problems with nobility, it turned around, and it was the artists. It was suddenly all the guided tours, and even the little booklets, the written booklets, was not much about the owner, Frederick the Great, but it was the artist. It was the architect Knobelsdorff, and it was and so on and so on and so on. And nowadays, the even larger interest is about the servants and who was really working there, and who is maybe comparable to the visitor, because, well, just a few visitors are nobility or high society. So we try now to do all these three levels in parallel. So to give an imagination of, well, the leading historic background power of the architects and artists, and of the use of the palace, what was it used for? And that's, I think, the same problem in all historic houses, maybe not so much in, let's say, artists' houses or so, because there are not three levels, but only two maybe. But that's a big problem, and still it's a construction site in all German palaces and in ours as well.
I'd love to know what has an impact on this narrative, because in England you can clearly see the Downton Abbey effect, that you are mentioning now. Even the lottery fund and so on is giving money to restoration of servants' quarters, kitchens, etc. Or also, let's say, Brideshead Revisited had a huge impact, the series, on the revival of the country house and visits to the country house. How would you say this in Germany? And I haven't been there since 1992, really. I mean, not lived there. What do you think is, what has an impact on the narrative and on the interest of the younger generation, or different generations of visitors who come to Sanssouci and the ensemble?
It's definitely two aspects, or even three. So one is exactly what you said. So Downton Abbey and all these Hollywood movies, so they are very important to the people, because they come and then they are in the real surrounding, and they want to, well, to see how that for example, the question about upstairs and downstairs is absolutely by these series. Then, of course, the people compare what they see around the world. We have many, many foreign tourists. And if they've been to England and they saw chimney fire and they saw kitchen full of blood and I don't know what, they compare and say, oh, no, it's so unlively here. Can't we change something? And what was the third impact? The third, of course, is also sorry, is also of course the knowledge. We don't know much about these things because history and documents, they are very selective here. And for example, when we did work on a new concept for Charlottenburg Palace in Berlin, which is the really big one, where all the generations of the Hohenzollern lived. We had a couple of rooms where it was hard to find out how they were used in, well, the 18th century, how they were used in the mid-19th century, who was living there, who was moving there, what was happening there, because there are side rooms and no one ever noted. So it's that's the thing of research only. And you know, the Germans are maybe, even me as Swiss included, are maybe an own type of very very clear people. We do not like to just interpret or to do like it could have been. So this lightness, this light aspect, which I always love in France or in England, just give a story and it's good. So doesn't happen in Germany. So if we can't prove by print or by something, we don't do it.